Thanks for having me. And thanks to the esteemed panel here for joining us. Really, this conversation is going to be grounded in authenticity and identity within the metaverse and how that looks within this new paradigm. We really believe that the metaverse will be the future of computing. It's a new revolution that's happening, and it's really exciting to see what our lives will look like in the metaverse. I'm Dan Berger. I'm the CEO of Frontier Collective. One of the big missions that we're trying to do is bridge all frontier tech. So bridging together VR, AR, metaverse, artificial intelligence, Web3, robotics, because I really feel like a lot of these technologies will intersect, and we're no longer talking about verticals anymore. We're talking about horizontal technology that will be revolutionary within this kind of new wave of computing that we're facing. I'm based in Vancouver. Vancouver is one of the leading hubs for the metaverse technology and Web3 as well. Dapper Labs is one of the big Web3 catalysts in the region. And we'll intro our guests here. Tim Rohrbaugh. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at JetBlue Airways. Next, we have Elizabeth Hyman, President and Chief Operating Officer at XR Association. And then right beside Elizabeth, we've got Matthew McDermott, Chief Client Officer at Access Partnership. And right by Matthew, we've got Alex Holland from Verbella, President and Co-founder. And then last but not least is Tom Emmerich from... he's a director of product management at Niantic. Sorry, Tom. I always have eighth wall in my head now. So
still doing eighth wall, just now Niantic.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's start the conversation, and we can go with Tim first. And let's start it off with, what does identity in the metaverse look like to you?
This is a little bit aspirational. I hope that identity looks like a choice between your true identity or your personal persona, your work persona, and potentially your activist persona at a bare minimum.
+1 to all of that. I think what's really exciting is the opportunity to represent yourself in ways that you hope to represent yourself. Hopefully I'm looking at the back and maybe I'm in the wrong order. I see the guy at the table going, ah. All right, good. That there is incredible opportunity for representation in ways that we haven't seen before. We were chatting beforehand and sort of the generational aspects of what identity will mean, but also how do we set up sort of conversations around, business versus personal versus the activist world that you just talked about. So I think these are things that are evolving and that we're all working on.
So I think that identity is about choice, our ability to decide who we are in the metaverse, but it's permission choice, because the people we're interacting with have to be comfortable with how we are presenting ourselves. And we can unpack that during the discussion.
Yeah, agreeing with a lot of these thoughts too, but showing up as you want to show up in the situation, right? So we focus a lot on the enterprise and work setting. So when you show up in a work setting, what is the appropriate way you want to represent yourself in that setting that's also appropriate to maybe your employer as well?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, one of the biggest opportunities for the metaverse is moving into a time where we have fluid identity. And back before I joined Niantic, I did a talk at AWE on the death of reality, and one of the deaths that I talked about was the death of fixed reality and the rise of fluid identity. And so knowing that the metaverse, or a big part of the metaverse, is unlimited potential by leveraging digital content and merging that with the physical world, in the case of augmented reality, or complete simulation in the case of VR, I think there's potential opportunity for us to be able to explore and express and enable us to be able to be a variety of people within our lifetime, and then learn from that and enrich who we are as we walk around the real world.
Tim, how do you feel about some of the security issues that are already starting to come up, and a lot of what's going on with trolling? For example, I've seen some instances where women were getting harassed by people within VR chat or some of the other social platforms out there. How do we make sure that we have the right barriers in place so that that we can sort of police that, and but ensure that it's still sort of a non-walled off garden essentially?
Yeah, I mean, that delves into, the answer kind of delves into the difference between privacy and security. And so we really need the ability to be anonymous or to be selective with what we give away about ourselves. And from the standpoint of privacy, I think whoever was here earlier heard me say this, is that from the standpoint of privacy, it's a very personal thing. So if there's a situation where all of a sudden you're being stalked, you're going to feel differently about your data going out. And so you need to be able to switch and restrict, and you need that freedom to be anonymous to a certain extent in that situation. And obviously, this is where we have to have multiple context and multiple personas to initially allow the system to do this.
And I just wanted to piggyback on that a little bit. When you think about the different use cases, that's where it really starts to get interesting. So one of the things that I like about identity is this ability to express yourself in ways that you may not have otherwise been able to do, but you want to do so in a safe space. So LGBT tech is creating different platforms to allow people to explore their sexuality. Or Help Club, which is a peer counseling platform, you want to be able to go there and feel safe that you can actually explore the things that you need to explore.
And let me just say one thing to that. Absolutely, there are the cases that we want to build this as an economic engine, right? And so at some point we have to be our true identity, but it has to be very selective with our bank, with our healthcare provider, maybe something like that.
That gets to your permission.
Yeah, I think the permissioned element is crucial here. So there are going to be different spaces in the metaverse. There'll be those where it says on the door there are no rules. You might be in a party, and you might be a dragon, and you might be talking to an octopus, and that's absolutely great. You might be in an education setting. There might be very restrictive rules as to what identities are allowed access and how you present yourself. But I think in the corporate environment, that's most interesting, where you are doing a deal or signing a contract. You may want to be very sure about who you're working with, and there may be very strict rules, maybe even legal rules, about how you present in that environment. And I think how the governments engage with that and how we give that ability to express identity, but ensure the other party is comfortable with that, is going to be an interesting discussion over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and maybe even building on that, we drink our own champagne, as Kat likes to say, in the sense that we go to work every day in our platform. That's how our team shows up. And one thing we do from the selection process is actually hire people through our platform without ever seeing their physical identity. And we tell ourselves as a great story in terms of not being biased or removing some of the bias in terms of the selection process. But we're probably also introducing other biases that we might not be cognitively aware of yet. So how do we explore that and do what's right for the business and trying to select the right people, but also what's right for the employees who are seeking a job?
And Tom, can you speak a little bit about the augmented reality space and how we'll be able to sort of express ourselves in new ways through the physical and the digital?
Sure. Before I do that, though, I just want to say one thing, which is it's interesting when we think about these as new problems for the metaverse, but certainly we are in a time where I call it the sandbox. It's before we go live with technology. And so up until this time, this 2D technology that's been behind the screen, which is fairly safe, I'm going to use safe with quotation marks, has caused us to run into these conversations around authentication, identity, multiple personas. I remember when I was on Twitter for the very first time, I had a work Twitter, a personal Twitter, a social activist Twitter, and now I only have one Twitter because now the in vogue thing is to combine the three, and you have to show personality in different sides. So the reason why I bring this up is because I think we have a lot of learnings to glean, as well as a lot of action items to take within the 2D space, the social and gaming included, that if we start to get those right and we start to understand how we can extrapolate those learnings, extrapolate those actions into the metaverse, then I think we'll start off with a really great foundation of tools. Certainly, the old world does not equal the new world, so there will be new nuances and social norms and social contracts that will have to be put in place. But we have this opportunity to really face the problems as opportunities within identity, privacy, security, safety on the 2D networks in order to inform what we do next. On the augmented reality side, I think what's really exciting is thinking already around how we're using augmented reality to express ourselves. Outside of e-commerce and retail, as well as marketing, I would say one of the #1 ways that augmented reality is being used on mobile today is in self-expression. And through that self-expression, really facilitating a brand new type of social content that moves us away from taking that same picture of ourselves to giving us tools that allow for us to use special effects within our social feeds. And so in this way, we're able to express what our favorite team is, or our heritage, or to play around with being a dragon. It may not be fully immersive. It may not be as embodied as you would be in Verbella, for example, in a simulated environment. But it does allow for you to show a piece of your personality, show a piece of your persona, which we all have multiple sides to our persona, in a really fun and exciting way. And you can draw that dotted line to when we start to wear these glasses out and about at all times, when you walk down the street and we opt to express ourselves with augmented reality in much the same way that we choose to today put on clothing from our closet. And so I find that really exciting. But it just in the same way as you walk into Verbella or other metaverse worlds in virtual reality, we'll have some opportunities to tackle challenges on authentication as you walk down the street and someone's a carrot and the other person's a dragon. If that's how it's going to all shake down, the question will be like, how do I know which carrot I'm talking to? So I think that this is a really interesting point of conversation.
And Elizabeth, around sort of that diversity and inclusion angle, how do we make sure that both from the top-down perspective of the industry itself, how do we make sure that it's not a tech bro fest in the new kind of paradigm that we're building right now, and then going into the metaverse, how do we make sure that it is inclusive for all to be able to feel like they can use this as an escape, essentially?
Yeah, representation is key. I see Amy Lemire out there from the WXR Fund, promoting women and people of color and different ethnic and societal backgrounds, not only to participate, but to make the technology, I think is really, really key. We're going to be talking about this more and more as the XR Association in terms of how we promote this industry, this workforce, to create these experiences and make sure that underrepresented communities want to be a part of it. How do we express ourselves and make sure that we're building from the ground up, not from the top down? So that's probably the biggest way to think about making sure this isn't a tech bro repeat, and coming up with exciting content and exciting ways in which the metaverse encourages different people to participate. And I'll give one example. There's a lot of discussion around metaversities, right? And maybe people are thinking, well, why do I want a digital twin of my university? Well, say I'm a single mom and I have a very full day. I need to take care of my child. I really want to participate and experience what the university life is like, but I can't do it physically. But now a metaverse, a metaversity, may well provide to me an opportunity to exchange real interaction with my classmates, with my professors. That's an interesting, an appealing way to make sure that this is something for everyone.
And I think that access is key as well. Like building on that is not only ensuring that we have a diverse set of folks that are creating metaverse and creating the hardware and being a seat at the table to join in the conversation on these types of topics. But on the flip side, we need to ensure that devices are accessible for a wide variety of people to be able to participate and show up within these worlds. So I think that's also key.
That's a great point. And earlier today, I think we heard a little bit about, we're in the process of commoditization so that hopefully at some point prices will come down. But one of the things that I love is the creativity around that conversation. So think about the Nevada Public Library system. They actually have headsets that are available to people through the library system so that they can take advantage of training programs. I heard a wonderful story about a woman in Nevada who was able to get one of these headsets, trained to become certified so she could deliver dialysis in a remote part of Nevada. So it's not the solution, but it's a conversation along the way.
I love that.
Alex, do you think some of the stuff around Web3 and some of the Web2 and some of the societal constructs through social media and some of the toxicity that was building within this current landscape, do you think that will move over to the Web3 metaverse ecosystem, or do you think there's ways that we can ensure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah, was that directed to me?
No, not at all.
I think a lot of it comes over as well, right? So how you engage communities and set up your community practices is incredibly important. How you safeguard your users is incredibly important. I think one of the advantages that we have is the real-time element, right? So it's easy to hide behind your Facebook profile or whatever it may be and put something out there. There is some level of anonymity maybe behind your avatar, but there's one step closer in terms of I'm able to have a real conversation with real human beings on the other side, which adds opportunity for both the good and the bad, right? So we certainly think about the good in the sense of building empathy and learning from people in different cultures and different parts of the world with different backgrounds. But of course, there's also opportunity for bad actors. So thinking about access and is interoperability good versus where does a high walled garden actually help out in protecting the community? When we know someone put something inappropriate on a web board or whatever it may be, can we identify that user so we can do something about it? Those elements are incredibly important.
And Tim, you've written some patents around some of the security and data aspects. What are some of the mechanisms that we need to do within the metaverse and Web3 angle of these technologies?
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, Tom brought up earlier, like we have this today. We have this problem, so we need to look at these problems of fraud, misuse, targeting other people with, hate. These things are all there today, so how can we eliminate them or at least make it more difficult? Like, security professionals are the only ones inside of a company that are paid to make somebody else's life miserable. It's the criminal. So we've got to create these barriers, right? And so we have to make it more difficult for them to pretend to be somebody. We have to make it more difficult for them to actually figure out who the target is that they want to go after. This is why we have to allow people to switch identities. And we have to be able to help them keep them separate where they want to, or not. But we do have to at least educate them on why to do this. So I think it's that context switching and how to keep your identity separate will really help folks.
And Matthew, how do you think the government should play a part in all of this, both on the ecosystem development side, but also within the metaverse?
Well, I think there's good news and bad news. I think on the good news side, there's an important role to play in enablement. So we talked about headsets being expensive and difficult to access. But if there's a use case that's going to support marginalized communities, for example, the government can play a role in subsidizing that, in providing training, in giving access, allowing people to make use and get access to the benefit. The bad news is then they like to regulate it. Then they like to control it. Then they like to decide who has access to it. And I think a lot of the debate is going to be about how we ensure that innovation remains possible, that the guardrails are kept as wide as possible. because there are elements around, we've talked about harassment already and some of the Web 2 problems that definitely are bad. I think everyone's agreed with that. And how we keep that outside without letting the controls go narrower. I think where identity comes into that is there's going to be a desire, particularly in a corporate setting, in a commercial deal setting, to have a very high level of identity, a very high level of certainty. And that requires knowing a lot about someone, maybe even biometric data. Who's going to own that? Who's going to hold that? Who's going to keep that secure when two companies work together? And I think government is part of the solution there, but it's about doing that without becoming over-wielding and holding back the benefit and the potential of the metaverse.
And just to build off of that, I think the place that you have to start is education. And lawmakers, just like us, need to know more about this technology. They need to know what the different sensors and cameras and other tools that are in these devices, what are they using in order to have the functionality of the device. I brought a little prop. We actually have put out a visual guide here that is intended for the general user, but I also think it's relevant for people in the government, right? To understand the day in the life of somebody who's using immersive technology, what is happening. And so that's sort of the very first place that we have to start when we talk to government officials, so that we're not acting out of ignorance or out of fear. There very well could be rational reasons for where we might need some regulation. We're building off the shoulders of existing laws and regulations like GDPR, like CCPA, like the Digital Services Act. All of these things are very, very important. They don't necessarily address XR specifically. We need to find the right balance where our innovators can continue to innovate, where our creators can continue to create, where we keep our workplaces and elsewhere safe. And if there are gaps, then we need to fill them. But it is sort of a shared responsibility, right, between the user, between industry, and between government.
And where it's going to work is where the government sees the value of the use cases,
Yes.
that education and seeing how it's going to benefit citizens. Then they'll become partners and not opponents.
And also, sorry, just to build off of that, government itself is a user of these technologies. We were chatting beforehand. The government of Seoul, South Korea has started its own metaverse to provide services. We were really thrilled to get immersive technologies included in the CHIPS and Science Act, so that when money is authorized for research and development, our technology is part of that conversation and eligible for additional research, which I think on an identity perspective will be needed. We need to sort of look at these things.
I just want to draw a distinction. We talk about identity and authentication. There's identity verification. So the only time that we actually have to verify somebody is who they say they are, identity verification, is when the account is created. Why do we have so many LinkedIn profiles which are being fraudulently created, right, today? Because they're missing identity verification. How you agree for somebody to come back in is authentication. Those things need to be designed in very specifically into this.
Tom, this is the big elephant in the room. Meta, they're funding this technology, the innovation of this technology, billions and billions of dollars. They're the clear winner, thus far within VR and AR, arguably. And there are a lot of other big corporates like Microsoft and Google that are playing a part in this. Are we kind of at this kind of winners take all type of approach, or do you think there will be other players that will win in this game, such as Niantic maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say, as a Niantic employee, I would certainly throw our ring in the hat, but also I'm not sure if I will comment directly on the winners, but what I will say is that, and this is what I was thinking as we were talking about governance and regulation, is that it is still early times. And so I know we're all in it. And we know as folks that are involved in the metaverse, we like to move fast. And that's why we're here at this summit. But it's still early days, and there's a lot of dust that still needs to settle within the metaverse, including what is the metaverse. And so, and I think, for me, I wrote about this in my article in the beginning of the year, but the metaverse for me is more of an aha moment than it is a virtual world or a piece of content or a game. And it really is just this realization of what the next wave of the internet could be. And it's made possible because of mass digital transformation, I think, that came out of the pandemic in particular, as well as the maturity of underlying technologies that have got to a point where we can better understand them and then see how they can converge and interoperate. And so I'm bringing this up because AI and AR and VR and crypto and blockchain, they can all succeed on their own in many different ways, but there'll be a journey for them to come together to really form the metaverse that we are all envisioning in some ways. We're on the stage in a very similar way to the early days of the internet, where we may have used the word the internet, but it was not the internet that it is, of 2022. And so back to your question, although indirectly, I think there's still a lot of growth and a lot of maturity that needs to be done in order for this industry to come together. And I think all parties that are here investing to try to move this next wave to the point where we have adoption and stable technologies and platforms and tools and devices in hand, we all need to work together in order to make the industry what it is going to be. So yeah, still early days, but we're making really great strides, and so I think there's lots to be done.
I just want to, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's benefits of moving early too. I think about our sister company, eXp Realty. Here's a company that got in 10 years ago when the founder lost his shirt in the 2008 downturn. And when he went to pick himself back up in 2009, he gave himself the business constraint of not operating with any brick and mortar offices and started operating in virtual worlds. There were 1,000 agents when they started working in Virbela in 2016. Today, there are 85,000 agents later, and they're the fastest growing real estate company in the world, operating entirely on the current state of technology, which we all agree has a long way to go. But the possibility is already there that this person has become a billionaire by building a traditional business in the virtual world. And what's fascinating to me, maybe as an organizational psychologist, is they've actually been voted Glassdoor's best place to work the last 5 years in a row. Right? So you think of the importance of identity and the ability to show up, having the flexibility to work from anywhere, but yet still feel present with your team members, your colleagues, and part of the global community of your company, I think is really important. And that really inspires me of like, oh my gosh, if this is what we can do today, just think what we can do in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years with some of these technologies as they come together, as you mentioned.
Elizabeth?
I was just going to add on to something that Tom mentioned. I strenuously believe that this is a shared journey. And it's really interesting to see groups like the Metaverse Standards Forum, which has been discussed today, 1,900 people participating, bringing together all these different voices and actors. There's the WC3, the ITU. There's like an alphabet soup of organizations. The World Economic Forum, our trade association has a Future of XR Advisory Council, and it's bringing together a wonderful group of stakeholders that aren't just in the industry, that include academia, that include civil society, that include government and industry. And that's the only way that we're really going to work our way through all of these different conversations. So I think that's a very positive sign.
So we only have a minute and a half left. So we'll go down through Tim all the way down to Tom, and just leave the audience with some few last thoughts.
From the standpoint of what you can even do today, I was advocating personas. Take stock of how you use your identities today. Think about those, and then conceive of a way and communicate with others a way to actually manage those in a safe way.
That's a great piece of advice. I think for us, again, we're thinking across the spectrum of both consumer use, enterprise use. So how do we get from that fluidity conversation to certainty? How do we secure the spaces that we're going to participate in? So.
the metaverse needs to enable choice and identity, but we need to make sure we work with all stakeholders, that everyone's comfortable in that space.
I think within the work context, and I think the metaverse has the opportunity to give people of different character who may struggle in the physical world more advantage in the digital world, and an opportunity to really shine in ways that they haven't been able to shine before.
Yeah, these are all so good. Jeez. What I would say, I think I would just leave by just saying, if you haven't jumped into like VR chat or Virbella or or used Snapchat or an eighth wall experience to play around with digital identity, I would encourage you to be a user and then ask yourself questions on how this differs and how your user behavior differs from how you're using Web 2 tools and how you're representing yourself in social media. And start to have a conversation with yourself and others on this, so we can keep this conversation going.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining this panel. It was an insightful discussion, and more over beers, I'm
Thanks,
sure.
Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.